Welcome to the Veterans Psychedelic Discourse. We are a group that advocates for safe and responsible exploration of mental health treatments. And this is not a platform for the solicitation of illegal substances. Well, where should we start? Where should we
Well,
backtrack
we
onto
were
that,
so
Brian?
basically for this show, what we wanted to do is just kind of do like a little update on some areas of research and maybe some changes to legislation that might be coming just in the areas of like DMT, psilocybin, ayahuasca, and ketamine. But we were talking about psilocybin before the show started, and McKenna's got this fascinating theory about how a spore itself is like a perfect interstellar traveler. It's like self-replicating, it's self-fertilizing, and it can survive in the vacuum of space, and it's like microscopic. So we were just talking about the idea of um, like
It
potentially
was
being like a form of technology, maybe even.
it was him. I feel like maybe it was Graham Hancock that was speaking on it, talking about Terrence McKenna.
Hmm.
I thought it was maybe Graham Hancock's idea. But yeah, like we were just saying, it's just so interesting how adaptable that fungus could be. It's just constantly changing to its environment and what's going on. So, if anything, any organism that I could think of could do it, it would be fungus. I don't know. Um, it's incredible. So,
And
it
that's
makes
the
sense.
yeah, and that's the best example I've heard of the that mystery of the doubling of the human brain size over a couple million years is from psilocybin.
The stoned ape theory. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
was
that
it?
was what some of the research that we have was showing was that it creates cognitive flexibility.
Mhm.
And I think we would call that like the expanding of the mind, but it's like breaking up those rigid thought patterns that are like literally keeping you where you're at, you know?
Yep.
Mhm. Was it the moon or was it Mars or something that they said that they found like remnants of like spores or fungus,
I think it was
a
Mars, but
mold?
don't quote me on that. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was maybe a couple years, 2 or 3 years back. But yeah, it's kind of
McKenna
interesting.
theorized that a spore could travel through space without being destroyed or something like
Yeah, well, yeah, it can survive the vacuum of space, but yeah, it's fascinating. That's kind of where we were at was like, how is this not a technology? You know, it's like
All right.
this is like what we're striving for right now is the ability to survive in that environment.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
have like a national forest connected through like you have all the trees and bushes connected into the fungal network and like mycelium and everything. I don't know. I just I feel like I'll say it again, kind of like their version of like the internet. I imagine if they're connected, they could kind of have an understanding of what's going on one end of like a national park. If
Well,
they're
I
more,
would I would actually argue that our internet is a synthesis of whatever this is. That this is the natural product that we are looking at and synthesizing into what we call the internet.
sure. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Where do you draw the line on them being different organisms when they're so interconnected like that?
Well, and I mean, this goes back to like some of the really old stuff, just the idea that maybe we've lost the ability to communicate. Like words were not always how we would communicate. Maybe our psychic abilities were a bit more developed in the past and we could do it unconsciously, kind of like plants do, you know, through a neural network that they're creating. So I don't know, you know, just lost abilities that we might have. And we're basically what we're doing is we're creating the internet to make up for that lost ability because we used to have an immense amount of connection. And so we're trying to replicate what we'd had before.
I wouldn't knock that. I mean, I feel like nowadays that everything's getting so automated that there's a lot less like you're not deliberately taking a lot of action compared to like back in the day. If you want water, you're not going to the faucet. You're going to go and take a hike with whatever you could manage.
It's so funny. I would actually argue that that's where a lot of the suffering that we look at comes from, that because everything's become so automated and so complex, it's made it so your lives are actually pretty meaningless. You only do a few things now. You don't do all the dynamic things that you used to do in the past, and that this is a natural byproduct of like our post-industrial modern information technology world where people are just forced to live somewhat meaningless lives because everything's so complex. We literally have to occupy kind of hive like roles like insects.
I can see that. I mean, people trying to automate just different functions that just have to be done, like having irrigation, water, and just quick access to food so that we could focus on the important things in life, right? Like, I don't know, the arts, and then go into something. But at the end of the day, people are still having trouble finding like the meaning of life. And I think the point of it m might be is to establish a sense of meaning for whatever it is that you're subjectively going through.
Well, and I think this is where I trend with the existentialist. I really think existential experiences are where it's at. You need to have like these moments where you're like, am I going to make it? And these are like the things that we're able to use and look back on as like points of reference of our success and our own personal ability. And without that, you're always left in a state where you're insecure about your own personal ability because you've never been able to test or try yourself. I mean, as vets, I don't think we can necessarily appreciate how pampered a lot of people's lives are and how little like existential experiences they might engage in a day to day, you know. It seems to be the exact opposite of what everyone's doing. Everyone's trying to have like the least experiential experience. You know, they want to have the most catered one where it's the most synthesized and the most wrapped in gauze and as safe as it can possibly be.
Well, you want the best food and the most the cushionest mattress and the most dopamine for the experience while doing nothing but like clicking a button. Boop.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, that reminds me of one of my favorite books I read. It's been a couple of years. I actually want to reread it, but it's called The Comfort Crisis.
Mm.
Drawing a blank on the author, but really good book, and it goes into detail about how everyone is just moving more and more and more into that comfort mindset, and it's actually doing more harm than good for us.
Yeah, just evolutionarily, that's not how we got here. We didn't get here by being comfortable. We got here by like, you know, being compelled to do great things in the face of great danger.
Yeah,
You know, it's funny that the whole trend, and maybe the last, I don't know, since the 50s of outdoors stuff. Uh, I think we used to do that to, you know, get into a rough situation or get back to nature. Now you go to REI, everything that you have at your house, you have a little mini thing that you can bring with you for
Yeah.
having that extra comfort. You know, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that is true that they're it's so funny you mentioned the micronization of everything because that really seems to be like where we're at in like this arc is we're not making new things. We're making everything smaller so we can bring it wherever we want to go. And it's like, I don't know if this is a good idea, guys. It's just like pushing harder and harder into it, never unplugging, like
yeah,
absolute thing.
You know, a lot of these organizations say we need to get people out into the outdoors more, but then it seems like the more people that go out there, it degrades the environment. You know, they just kind of they have a tendency to. I'm not
Well,
saying they
they've
shouldn't.
monetized it too. Basically, the way it works is whenever you go to any of those national parks and you buy your entrance fee, some of the entrance fee will go to the federal government, but there's a fee that's attached to it that will go to a private corporation. I want to say it's Booz Hamilton, but it's some corporation that's literally making money off of people being told to go outside because they're processing all the fees, and it's like a multi-million-dollar racket. So yeah, that's the problem. Is everything that you could have done in the past under like the free blue sky of nature has been like monetized. Now you pay to go to the beach or you pay to park, you pay to go to the forest, you pay to go anywhere. And it's like, if you don't pay, you get fined. I mean, this is Robin Hood, man. You can't even hunt in the forest for food anymore. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
And this is even for veterans that have the pass, like the annual pass for their disability to go into like state national parks, right? You still get charged like a $6 to $8 fee, and that's what the fee goes to.
Yeah, it's the fee that's exactly right. It's like a $6 fee, and that's not going to anybody but a private company. Yeah,
yep.
they manage the national. I don't know who does the California parks, but I'm pretty positive it's Booz Hamilton who does the national parks. You can Google that real quick. Yeah, and Booz
Yeah,
Hamilton is actually the company that who was that whistleblower from a few years ago? Moved to Russia.
Snowden.
Snowden, yeah, correct. Yeah, Booz Hamilton. They're renting us back our national parks. It's them. Yeah, fascinating.
Wild times.
Welcome to capitalism, boys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, and if they could prove that it goes to like conserving the national parks and stuff like that, that would be one thing. Because there's that tax on like hunting equipment and hunting gear and everything like that, and it actually does do a great service to the outdoors and stuff like that. If they could prove that, that would be one thing. But instead of, I think it's just more filling people's pockets.
Yeah, folks who know the Cheneys and the Rumsfelds and the Bushes.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, what we were talking about before we got into this was that we mentioned a little bit. Oxford is actually doing some studies on psilocybin, and what they're confirming is what we mentioned before, that people that are older tend to do better. And I think that the older, as we live in our lives, we operate like different phases. Like when you're 30, you're not really thinking about death, and if you are thinking about death, it's normally due to some experience that maybe was like out of place or out of time. Normally, like as you get older, that's when you become a little bit more focused on your own mortality and trying to live maybe a more dignified life that might leave a bit of a legacy. And so I think that's maybe what we're observing here, that these are people that are definitely primed. Like there's a true need for them to have an integration with the psychedelics, but then also the prior experience. And that's what I was saying before. This is why you keep going back. It's not a one-time process. It's literally a process of dying and rising over again. And you have to think about the psychedelics is basically just introducing a low-grade toxin into your body. Your body doesn't understand what's going on. It can just see that it's getting a mild toxin and it's going to respond accordingly. And for most cases, I mean, we've had a guy on who did snake venom a while ago. The immune system like amplifies, it kicks on in high gear, and it starts like with the snake venom, it'll flush out toxins, free radicals, cancers, things like that. So the body itself responds like immensely to these kind of conditions, and so that's why I would wager the repeated use is beneficial. It's like you've been here before, you know what you're doing, and you're just going to be developing more and more neural flexibility. So I wonder if you guys had any thoughts, just given the fact that you guys did your retreat a few months ago. I wonder if you have any antidepressant experiences that might you might be interested in sharing.
I do, but I have a question just to talk about like us being as people trying to like exploit the experience and getting dopamine and food and just kind of automate everything. Do you see in just like your own perspective that like there's a possibility of exploitation of like psychedelics as far as like because I if it's making your body feel like you're gonna people say like ego death or something. They felt like I felt like I was dying in some cases. It's like, do you see that being like an experience that people will try to even this exploit to get something out of life as far as like meaning and purpose?
From what I've seen from like the research I read, and we were talking to uh, the anesthesiologist, Dr. Rome, I'm forgetting the name.
Romig?
Romig, there we go, about this. But it sounds like what they're trying to do, because so psychedelics do a couple different things. The big thing is they alter gene expression, particularly like how your TRKB gene, which is has an antidepressant effect, expresses itself, and then also the 5-HT2A gene. That's like your serotonin uptake. So it augments how your body expresses those genes for a short period of time, maybe like 30 to 90 days. But what I would argue is the reason why your body begins to augment how they express those genes is because when you're on the psychedelic, you have the psychedelic experience. And this is kind of like the journey that might be a little bit scary. It might involve an ego death. It might involve you having to like reframe your perspective around a historical experience that had otherwise been traumatic, or to address maybe underlying causes behind like the use of substances. But the point would be that it's the journey that allows for the expression of change in your body. And what they're trying to do is take away the journey, get rid of the psychedelic experience, and just find a way to directly alter gene expression, particularly through those two outlets, the 5-HT2A and the TRKB gene are the two that are really of great interest to them. Although one of the articles we write about talks about how they're showing that the 5-HT1A gene is also being altered by the psychedelics too. So it'll be interesting to, I mean, the more we learn about this stuff, it's crazy. We used to just think we were popping pills and like, seeing weird colors. And it's like, no, there's like a whole background of science that's coming out of the research showing that this is all like a very predictable and reliable process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without the
Yeah.
experience, though, I mean, would you even realize that, my life is changing, or would it just eliminate the value of it? I don't know.
Yeah, that's I think the uncharted territory. It's like because I think back to some of my experiences, and I mean, I've been scared, I've cried, I've felt all kinds of emotions, but it was in the feeling of those emotions that allowed me to break up my previous beliefs. And it literally, I mean, this in alchemy, there's a process uh, the crystalline phase. It's like the second phase after the blackening, where you have to literally break up the rigid structures salt is crystalline. You have to break up the rigid structures to allow them to become a little bit more flexible. And that is what I think the journey does, is it breaks up your rigid structures and your beliefs in the constructs of society, and that they need to be a certain way in the way that you've always held them, and it allows you to look at them differently. So I don't know. That's the hard part, because it's like I go back to the existential experience. It's an existential experience to do psychedelics.
Sure. Well, people will come out of an experience and be like, okay, I want to change the way that I live. So my trip, my experience kind of focused on this aspect of my life. This is something I want to change. So I'm going to start consciously making different decisions and different habits. But to take away the experience out of the substance, like what if you just woke up one day and you didn't have the compulsion to engage in like destructive habits anymore? Like how long would it take to you to be like, I don't know. I liked drinking. Maybe I'm just going to go back. Like, or if you just all of a sudden have the freedom, would you just? I'm curious. It's an
I would,
interesting
I
thing. I'd
would,
like to.
I would ask that question on the backdrop of a Native American ritual wherein a boy becomes a man.
Oh,
Is he still the man without the ritual? I mean, it's like a paradox. It's like the very thing that you're doing to step into a new you, and you're trying to find any way not to do it. Like,
yeah. I guess it depends on who you're asking.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of these are tied in traditional uh, communities, like in Gabon with the ibogaine. That's sort of a something that the way I understand it, people in their maybe late teens go through the ceremonies of rite of passage to manhood. Maybe the uh, Indians in Mexico going on the peyote hunt for, 4 or 5 days, or maybe a week or two, or something like that, um, and being inebriated with peyote that during most of that time. That's part of their growing up, I think.
Yeah, fully. Yeah. I mean, rites of passage. Well, it's funny too, because I hear this complaint a lot. I think not the last psychedelic conference, but the one before. Like there was a lady there that was actually asking about, like, from the audience, like, what rites of passage are there for our boys to go through anymore? It's like none. You guys are, I mean, the military, that's about it, man.
Bring
That's
back the
exactly
fire
it.
ants.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys, look towards the military as that rite of passage, and that's kind of a blessing and a curse, I think, in how we've gotten to where we are with like Heroic Hearts Project, and the work that everyone else is doing is trying to kind of recover from a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard too when the only rite of passage you're left is to be a cudgel for a state. And
Yeah,
it's like, I don't know, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit different though because I mean for rite of passage into like an adult being an adult like everyone goes through that and not everyone joins the military and when you join the military not everyone joins infantry and not everyone going into infantry or combat in West not everyone is special forces. So it's
Mhm.
more of like a validation staircase than like everyone accepting each other. It's not like a collective self-esteem situation. It's like where do you stack up compared to those in your environment? And so it could be uplifting or also it could be kind of isolating.
Yeah, it's like a hierarchy of status that society gets to decide based on their own perceptions of what's
But it's
valuable.
the closest thing that we do have, but it even still doesn't quite fit the structure exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're just so ununified as a people. We don't really have a lot of things in common other than the restaurants that we go to and the homogenous culture we consume. Other than that, everyone's being like kind of encouraged to be like isolated and individualistic.
Well, aren't you going to be getting that if you mix up people from all around the world? I mean, if everyone's encouraged to be themselves and be different, then you're bound to eventually run into that, right?
Yeah, but I would argue that this is the conditions of a madhouse, man, where the patients are living in their own worlds to such a degree that they just ignore each other. That's a
Hmm.
fucking madhouse. That's not a,
Right, right,
that's not a society. We
right,
live in
right,
a
right.
society.
Yeah, I yeah, but I got VR now, Brian.
I know, right? Yeah, that meme you sent me of that guy out there exploring the real world on his living room with the VR goggles on.
Yeah, there's this meme of it's like you see all these cells on like a someone's skin and like they're all have faces and it's like I am part of a collective and then it shows like the parts of the body and it zooms out and it's like I am part of this like this organism and then it shows this guy and he's like in nature. He's like, I am part of the universe. And then it cuts to a guy in his underwear with VR goggles on in his living room that's totally trash. And he's like, I'm alive.
Oh man.
Too
Yeah, it's
good.
wild. Yeah, as far as the antidepressant effects go for psilocybin, I know that for myself, when I started this journey, that was like a huge thing that clicked. But it came with like an innate sense of connectivity with everybody else. I think that was the big moment that churned off a lot of the depression for me was internally when I was able to understand how connected I was with everyone else. It took a lot of like the fear and the element of danger out of it, because I think in a lot of ways I was still living like I was like in Iraq, or that everyone was presenting like an equal threat like I was still in Iraq. So as far as the antidepressant goes, like feeling more connected with other people, that was a huge thing. Like, and almost immediately too. That was like one day everything just changed kind of thing. Pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
That's the common one. That's the common one, at least for me, is the connectedness, feeling connected with other people or my environment. But I feel like I wonder if that's because I my baseline is feeling less connected. Because I feel like a lot of the times that I'll do larger doses, then that's kind of like the focus is like reconnecting with people and my environment. But I wonder if that is also just a typical or just a very common scenario for veterans as a whole.
I think
I would
especially
actually, sorry.
veterans, because that's one of our, it's one of everybody's, but especially veterans. That's one of our safety nets is building up our ego, and that puts that mask on, that shield. And I think that's one of the big things that psychedelics do is they shut down that default mode default mode network, which lowers our ego and our inhibitions and allows us to see how we actually are connected to everybody instead of feeling like we need to be in that shield, in that mask, and in our little protected zones.
Yeah. Yeah, fully. I would actually argue that this is also like a consequence of capitalism and like postmodernism that essentially like in order to better sell to us and to make more money, we're being like more and more individualized as a commodity. So they don't want everybody to have shared beliefs and values because then everyone's just interested in consuming the same things. By everyone being super individualistic, now they can market to us in a broader way and maybe more specialize the advertisements they give us to ensure more profit per advertising dollar. So I actually think this is a symptom of what we're dealing with from like a marketing perspective, that we're actually being driven away from each other because it's easier to sell to people when they're isolated instead of getting like their natural like dopamine hits out of socialization or having a strong sense of community that they have a place in.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of another book that I read. It's called The Molecule of More, and how we're wired and addicted to want more and more and more and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like a deeply philosophical realization that the hardest thing to do in the world is to not take the thing that you want and can take.
Yeah.
Well, this reminds me of talks that you and I would have, Brian, where just I would just feel down and just I'd be looking at either the past or the future and just being like unsettled by one thing or another. And you would always be like, "But are you like good right now?" And I'm like, "Technically, yes. I'm dry and I'm warm and I just had dinner and my wife's on the couch with the cats and you got a point." And so I feel like the thing that I get a lot of out of taking a maybe microdose, but especially larger trips, it's like it does, gosh, it makes me realize how important it is to have a practice that kind of brings you back into being a little bit more present, like meditation or yoga or something, because I get in my own head and I'm not appreciating the stuff that's good right now. And I if I have more, then I'm safer, more stability, and I'm worrying about this thing. But um, instead of like trying to get more or exploit my dopamine receptors, it's like, oh, what it does for me regularly, if I was to taking large doses, it just reignites just my curiosity and just enthusiasm for being alive. And it's just like, oh, right now everything is fucking great. Look, what great weather we're having. And it's just like I'm just stoked on just like little things. And there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's easy to get caught up in the rat race again, right? And I mean, even me and Jake did the Heroic Hearts retreat in July a couple months ago, and it's like, fuck. There's been plenty of times that I'm just like, I've thought to myself, like, fuck, I'm back into I'm back into the old ways, and it's like, but I do recall what it was like, and I have the ability to kind of get myself back there. And it's like I feel like taking uh, large doses more than microdoses. It's for me, it's re-having the old epiphanies that are important, and then trying to leave some breadcrumbs to get back there when I'm not on the substance, so that I could kind of. I feel like there's less need over time a little bit. Maybe there's scenarios that you benefit from having a large dose. Maybe if it might help with morning or you, Brian, I know that you'd like to do it during like the solstices and the equinoxes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's good to have like a routine, maybe not super often, but that's just my subjective thing. I can't really call that
Yep.
out for
Yeah.
anybody.
Personally, for me, I feel like for a larger macrodose, it starts to become more necessary around the 9 month period for me. About 9 months in, I start to be like, my old routines have come in and they've created more of a pattern, and I'm like, okay, I'm feeling some things I need to break and get back into my authenticness.
Hmm.
But the microdosing definitely helps me kind of stabilize that and makes me more even keeled when I'm in between those times for sure.
It just
Uh,
kills me. We got three vets here talking about like the ability of these substances, which are totally natural, to like help recover from what we would classify as mental health problems related to combat, and they're not legal. It's just like
Yeah.
insane, man. It's
Well,
absolutely insane.
just because like a big part of it, I think, is what we were just talking about, how like I would only really need to, like maybe 9 months every once a year, maybe. And so you can't make a lot of money off of that when
Yeah.
back to that capitalism thing. It's not something they can get me hooked on where I need every single day or multiple times a day even.
Yeah. Yeah. See,
which
and I,
makes health not the priority.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
In Colorado, it is legal.
Oh,
You can grow them and you won't get arrested for it. I guess that's what makes it. I mean, sure, federally it's not
yeah, I was
legal.
gonna say until the feds get on board, man, you're looking at like potential like Ruby Ridge situations.
Yeah, but I think the genie's out of the bottle in Colorado. We
Yeah,
just
yeah,
have to do that for other states.
yeah, that's kind of the whole point. Is like, I mean, obviously, I get the factors that are at play here. There's a financial industry. You've got like people that are literally on the dole every week, paying professionals to go and talk to them about their problems, and that would evaporate if people started doing this. Um, so yeah, and that's funny too because mental health is supposed to be like one of the booming future like fields with lots of growth in it, and it was like that would just absolutely kill a growth field.
Yeah.
Well, in Colorado, they made it legal, and then they're currently going through a program or developing a program to make that like sort of I wouldn't say the Oregon model uh, being the same price or anything, but trying to develop the psychedelic assisted therapy in Colorado, and it will be, there's more than just mushrooms, uh, but you can't get arrested for them, and I think that um, I've been working on a thing, talking to people about, can we get the people either in our city councils or uh, police, just to say veterans will not be arrested for using mushrooms.
Yeah.
There's other things, and if they can just, it's not like we're telling people they need to take them, just to establish that we believe veterans shouldn't be arrested for this. Do you agree or disagree? And try to move that. Recently there was a Veterans Day, and where I live we had a uh, celebration for veterans, and I went and approached a number of people, several mayors, uh, someone who was the sheriff of the county, and talked to them about this, and they all seemed to go, "Oh yeah, I've heard about that." Especially with the National Defense Authorization Act last December, that the federal government, not the federal government, the Department of Defense is authorized to do research on this now, which is kind of like a little bit of an okay for that. There's four chemicals that they talk about, but the easiest one for any veteran to get is psilocybin mushrooms. So I think we're at kind of maybe a tipping point, although it's maybe still a year or two off. But anyway, that's my little spiel. I'll get off the soapbox.
Does anyone know what they were using in Ukraine? Because they've been using psychedelics in Ukraine to treat PTSD for the combatants who are fighting out there. Does anyone know what they're using? Is it
We might
DMT
know
or
someone that does.
Yeah, to my knowledge, it was MDMA. It
MDMA? Okay, gotcha.
was
Well,
actually,
that's what I was going to say. I got a feeling the U.S. is itching for a war, maybe with Iran or something, and so you might see like a run up of like legalization of psychedelics just to get people like psychologically integrated to get back in the pool. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like,
Well, and I'm pretty sure that they've started in some VAs allowing them to like refer people to MDMA assisted therapy. I'm not sure if I feel like I've heard of that, but I'm not 100%. I know that they've done it for ketamine, but I think that I've heard they're doing some with the MDMA as well.
yeah, the ketamine and the SGBs seem to be the big ones that the actually, and it's really the SGB. That's what they're pushing more than anything because the ketamine you can't smoke marijuana, you have to piss test before you get into the
Mhm.
program. So there's all kinds of other little caveats and loopholes. Yeah.
Yeah, that SGB is it's a powerful one too. I don't know if you guys have had it yet, but
I've had one before and I'm going in to get another one in December.
yeah.
It was kind of weird, like, because I'm really big on the concept of presence and I understand what it does.
Mm.
And like I don't think I've ever been more present than when I had a needle shoved in the back of my neck. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm not sure
Totally.
what the residual effects were actually from.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to see them combining the SGB with similar to like the ketamine and the MDMA, an assisted therapy type thing to where there's like a or how heroic hearts does it, how there's some protocols for after. So maybe even before and after. Because for me, the SGB shot was it was incredible, but it was short-lived until I
Yeah.
fell right back into my old habits, my old feelings, my nervous system being unregulated. So I would like to see there be a more of a combination with like doing some maybe some yoga and meditation practices, maybe leading up to and afterwards to try to extend that period of when you're feeling, completely regulated and calm and present.
So I have a theory. When I went and took this shot, I was like really trying to evaluate what was going on. My theory is that when they're shooting the low grade Novocaine in, they're really just numbing like the bundle of nerves there. And I was talking to the doctor about how you could synthesize that naturally, and she's like, "Oh, there's nothing you could do." I was thinking about that. I don't think that's true, man. I think if you could come up with a cold pack that would fit over your shoulders and cover this particular portion of your body, and like a custom made one, not like some janky thing, and you pop that thing on for like 10 minutes just to allow that nerve bundle to cool and to freeze and to chill out, I would bet you can synthesize nearly the same result, maybe short term, but basically, like if you're dealing with intense PTSD and the symptoms thereof, that might be like a spot treatment, just being able to put like a cold jacket on or something that's literally
Yeah.
going to cool the nerve bundles and turn them into something a little bit more calm.
Yeah, I would agree. I've heard of a couple other smaller practices like that that you can kind of stimulate or relax that bundle I would probably guess that they're not as powerful because the SGB is like you can't deny it. You can't fight and resist that shot. Like when
It's a
that
low
shot
grade
happens,
anesthetic. I mean, you're going to feel it by not
yeah,
feeling it. Yeah.
yeah. So even if you're like maybe you're like, oh, you don't believe in woo-woo stuff, or maybe you're not into like the cold exposure and everything like that. Because those things I think you could kind of probably resist that feeling a little bit. But yeah, the SGB shot, you can't resist it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
So
When you
is
said
that
it
some
didn't last very long, are we talking about a month, 3 weeks, or something like that? Because ketamine also is good, but it has to be repeated. Um, so the SGV, how how long did it last for you?
They were telling me that you could expect about 30 days out of it.
Okay.
That's what they tell you. Normally everyone will expect about 30 days. I don't know what they told you, but that was the pitch they gave me.
I was going to say about 3 weeks for me is about what I got at. I feel like.
And how deep do you have to go for this injection? Do you know? Is it's not on the surface, but
You're there. I mean, you can look it up. Just look up the stellate ganglion nerves and it'll show
okay.
you where it's located. But yeah, I mean, you can't see, you're looking facing away, but like, a needle's about to go into your neck. It's just like, I don't know, man. Like, yeah.
And I mean, I'm not sure the dangers of that, but it's a little bit nerve-wracking when you go in there like, oh, I'm trusting this guy just to shove this needle in my neck. I mean, for me, I don't know with everybody, they do it with like the ultrasound and everything like that. So it's
Yeah.
seems pretty safe, but yeah, it's a procedure for sure. It goes in, it feels like probably, I don't know, about a good inch and a half or so.
Did you
yeah,
have
but
it
are you
down here in Long Beach?
Me? No, I had it done here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I kind of had to work and prod at the VA a little bit extra probably than most people to get it referred out in
Gotcha.
network. But yeah.
Yeah.
oh you
Cool.
got community care for it?
Yeah, which I think is probably more available to people than they realize, but you do have to push for it. It's not like something you can like go in there and be like, hey, I heard about this. Can I get that? You have to have already gone through the steps of like the medication route, the talk therapy route, and then you kind of have to prod and be like, kind of get them to work for you.
Did that calm your nerves, knowing that it's not being conducted by the VA?
Um, it's a good question. I tend to think that I do probably generally put a little more trust in the community care, just because that's a private sector. Those guys actually have to, perform and work to maintain their business and their money. They don't get the same kind of government funding and everything like the VA does. So, um, I feel like pretty lucky. I haven't had a lot of negative experiences with the VA. I'm not saying that people don't. I know a lot of people have a lot of negative experiences through the VA, but I feel like my experiences for the most part have been pretty positive for the most part. But yeah, I do feel slightly more comfortable when especially a procedure like this, get it done out in town.
Do you guys think that's widely known throughout the VA as a procedure?
Personally, I don't think so. Like I said, most people I don't think would realize that it's possible to get that, something that's referred out into the community. I think that they don't promote that. I don't know exactly, why. I don't know if it's a monetary issue or something like that, but
It's
all the
not it's
community
not
care stuff.
average best. It's not tested yet. That's why. Because I can tell you they'll basically what they've got two teams down in Long Beach that they work with. One guy who's on 60 Minutes, and he's like the guy who got the whole program started, and then a whole team of doctors that do the second crew. Um, but yeah, they're not sending you out because it's not like average best treatment. It's not there's not research backing it, so that's why they don't want to fund it. But I bet because you're so far out there in Idaho, it's just kind of like whatever, because yeah, it'd be a pain in the ass that you fly in.
Well, and I think, to be honest, I think this is ringing a bell. I think the way that I got mine approved through my doctor is because it's at a pain clinic, and I think that they pushed this through under the guise of pain management. I don't think that I don't think they approved it based off like PTSD and anxiety and stuff. I think that this one got approved somehow through like a pain management type of situation.
Yeah, and that's where all the research started on this. So yeah, okay,
Yeah.
cool, nice. That's interesting.
What's the experience for you guys who have had it like? I know it's not like a psychedelic thing, but you're numbed up, and that's probably anesthetic lasts what, a couple of hours, like when you go to the dentist. Um, how, what's the overall change that you notice?
You don't really feel numbness, at least from my experience. Not like for the dentist, where you're like drooling or
Right.
anything. Maybe a little bit of tingling for a little bit. But for me, the big thing is paralysis is a big part of anxiety. When I feel anxiety, I get paralyzed and I'll just like, let's go have a beer. And
Mm.
so for me, it was like, holy crap, I just know what I need to do now. And it was so easy to put like one foot in front of the other to take care of things that would have otherwise been anxiety inducing and paralyzing. So my ability just to perform basic tasks without feeling paralyzed or anxious, wow, through the roof.
So within a day, you notice that, like all the
Yeah,
barriers were gone.
it was so funny. I actually was dealing with an immensely stressful situation at work during this period of time, which is one of the things I like to include when I talk to people about it because it affected the outcome. And so I still carried a lot of anxiety even after it was over. But that was when I noticed the difference was I knew exactly what I needed to do to take care of the anxiety, and I was able to do that.
So everything lined up for you.
Kind of. I mean, I think really what it was so here's what's happening. Your amygdala is sending signals based on your experiences. If you have a whole bunch of really shitty experiences, your amygdala gets tricked into thinking that it needs to be signaling your stellate ganglion all the time and letting him know that it's time to get stressed out, stressed out, stressed out. So it's producing all this cortisol. So when you put the shot in and you give it the low grade anesthetic, you're actually shutting off the alarm bell that your amygdala is trying to set off and preventing the body from sending you into the cortisol loop that you call everyday life. And so when that doesn't happen, you're not going to keep getting the same response. Rather than getting caught up in that cycle of cortisol, you're now able to maybe better evaluate what you want to do because your body's not constantly flooding itself with an unhelpful substance based off of your historical experiences that do not match where you're at right now.
So did that happen like immediately, or within an hour? And you,
Before I even left the doctor's office, I knew
wow.
exactly how I was supposed to take care of the problems that I had at work.
Okay.
Yeah,
What does it cost to have this done if you wanted to pay for it yourself, you think?
I think it's like $1,600 on average.
Wow.
There are other people that will do what's known as a dual ganglion block, and that, from their perspective, adds to the efficacy. If you go to the VA and you don't get anything out of a single side block, they will also do a dual block on you as well. So that would be a little bit more expensive, but there's just options with treatment.
So can we talk our dentist into trying this for us?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Is it possible that we could get our dentist to do this to us?
Well,
It's just
you're a vet, right,
anesthetic.
guy?
I am.
Yeah, you could contact Long Beach and set everything up, and they'll fly you down and have you do the thing and set you up at the hospital down there.
Okay.
Yeah,
What I'm
hell, let me
thinking
know when you're
is,
down here. I'll drive up there and we can grab some dinner together.
hey, sounds good. There's some dentists are advertising Botox, I mean, it's
Oh
just
yeah,
like
yeah.
there's, it wouldn't take them too much of a stretch to specialize in this, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just the hairy task of like lining that needle up with that bundle of nerves and then getting it in there.
Maybe it sounds worse than it is.
It's so funny because the first guy that was on 60 Minutes, he seems like he's got this down to a T. I can't remember his name, but he like works by himself. He doesn't use MRIs, or sorry, not MRIs, but the sonograms or whatever they're using. He just like does it. And so then the extra crew and they tell you this, they're like, well, there's going to be two different ways it's going to happen. You'll either have this guy who's the reason that the system is here or the program's here, or you'll have this other team of doctors that will like go through the full process of doing like the sonogram and being real slow and mellow. And I got the whole team of doctors. It took a while. It felt very sterile, but it went well.
Where's the guy located? The solo guy.
Long Beach, they're both at the
Oh,
same hospital. They just do the procedures on different days.
hmm.
Yeah. I would highly encourage you to give them a call and ask about it. I mean, you're a veteran, you're entitled to this. They will literally help you get down there and they'll give you a place to stay.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I'm non-combat, so it might be a little, hard to come up with a story. But
Well, I mean, I don't know. I would just give him a call, just talk to him. And at least then maybe you'll know where the bypass, or sorry, where the impasses are, and you can come up with plans to get around them. But yeah, I mean, it's there. Call and ask. Well, so that brings us to our next area, some updates with 5-MeO DMT. There's a company called Beckley SciTech, and they've developed a formulation of it that they're calling BPL-003, and we'll probably try to patent. They're showing that in 55% of the participants, they were noticing a significant decrease in depression. And that lasted all the way 85 days out after treatment. So positive results from tests in the DMT. We talked about this before. I'm always a little bit sketched out though whenever they're making like these small augmentations to existing chemicals, and for the purposes of patenting them entirely, because the actual substance itself will remain illegal while the patented item will now be legal to sell, which I think that should be criminal. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have any experience with 5-MeO DMT. Lady who told me about it said that you would potentially shit yourself or vomit. So I was kind of like, I don't know, man.
I tried it twice in the same day,
How was it?
and it was like two different experiences. The first one in the morning where it was very sunny, and I was with a lot of younger people. It was kind of like angels are in the room, and everyone was having this,
You had a rave guy?
real nice. What's that?
You said you were at a rave?
No, it was
No, I'm
I think
teasing.
a dozen people, less than a dozen. And then in the evening, it was like dark. There was fewer people. They were older. Um, because of this, putting some tobacco juice in my nose, that was part of this traditional thing. It went down into my stomach, and I had dry heaves, and it was just like heaven and hell kind of.
Sounds
I
like
should
it.
have just
Jeez.
stuck with the one. Stuck with the one. Um, it was good. I kept thinking though, there people says that top of the pyramid as far as the non-dual experience, and I kept feeling like, well, this is great. And then I go, oh, my ego's back. Nope, not working. My ego's back. It just I was judging it, kind of like figuring out what's going on here. So I'd like to try it again. I think at the right experiences, right setting, I guess.
Hmm.
That's a big one, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't done 5-MeO.
Yeah, never tackled the 5-MeO.
I don't know if it was that much different than just NN DMT. For me, um, yeah, I think I need a few more times to kind of, the first time you do something, it's like, what's going on here? Trying to, are the
Hmm.
walls moving or whatever? And then once you go, okay, just go with it instead of being so, trying to analyze everything.
Yeah, I mean, I've taken the NN enough times and was totally taken to just another place. And it makes me think of those. I don't, who was conducting the study, Brian? Was it to
Imperial
map
College in
where?
England, they're trying to map the DMT world and do like an IV drip.
Yeah, that is just wild to me. I could only imagine the stuff that these people are going through. Like
Yeah.
like do you go home to like are these people married and go have kids and they just like go home at the end of the day after like 8 hours of that?
Well, the thing that was tripping them out was when they would do their debriefs after the sessions, they were meeting the same entities. Like different people were meeting the same entities and reporting them. And so it's kind
Mhm.
of like, what the
That, and
fuck?
I think a lot of the similar places too, from my
Yeah,
understanding, that's what
places.
they were
Yeah. So
trying to
that's
do.
when they got the idea of mapping it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they're just, I think anybody can sign up for it. I don't know. I actually applied for it a while ago, but I didn't follow up. Because to be honest, I was a little bit nervous and you have to go all the way over there too. But yeah, because I think they put him under for an extended period of time, like 2 hours or something
Yeah.
like
It's like over an hour. Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe an hour was the threshold. So yeah, you're down for a while.
I
Yeah.
would do
Wasn't
it.
wasn't Strassman, Rick Strassman, doing a
I,
prolonged thing
I
too?
think it was, but I think they discontinued it from what I remember because people were getting weirded out that when they were coming off of it, um, they everyone agreed that the reality that we all share, like right here and right now, is less real than the place that they just came from.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember him like kind of frustratingly being like, I just didn't know what to do with what we were finding. That was his thing. It's like he didn't know what to do with it.
What are the values of that? That was the first research with a psychedelic. I think it was in '95, or maybe that's when his book was published. And before that, no one would even
Touch it,
consider
yeah.
anything on that at all. And it was, I mean, it's a whole different universe from some of the other psychedelics too, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's, I mean, well, and then also like the whole concept that this DMT is like endogenously produced and like we appear to have like a dump of DMT as we're like dying. I mean, like just to tell a personal story, my uncle passed last year in June. And I was there on the day that he died when he was kind of like going through his like death throes. And I remember he looked up at his son and he's like, I'm tripping. It was like, holy crap, man. Like, yeah, it's an intense process and your body's naturally doing it. And this is when I go back to the whole dying before you die. This is a process you're going to go through when you die. Get comfortable with it. Have it be an old friend, not
Yeah.
something you're afraid of.
Yeah, that's a common thing they talk about with people who have near-death experiences is that they pass to this other realm and it's often more real feeling than this one and it's often more just overwhelmingly beautiful and comfortable and they don't want to come back a lot of the time, but they get messages like that they have to or something like that. So
Yeah. Wild. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where we are in 2 to 3 years based off of that kind of research.
mm,
Yeah. And how public it is too. That's what I wonder about, how public they're going to make everything. We have a penchant for making things classified that don't deserve to be classified.
yeah.
So, also, there's been some new updates in ketamine as well. They're showing that it significantly reduces depression, but then also generalized anxiety and social anxiety, and that there are no major adverse effects. What's interesting about this is it's through repeated doses. So it's not like you just go in for a single regimen of ketamine. This is like through repetition. Their research is showing that there's prolonged benefit to depression, anxiety, and just your social, your ability to socialize with others. So there's also another ketamine trial that's excuse me shows large reduction in PTSD symptoms after usage. This was intravenous ketamine. So I know that there's a big push for like nasal sprays and stuff like that now, but intravenously they're showing additional large reductions in PTSD symptoms. My last thing I got to talk about is ayahuasca, and this was kind of interesting too. So ayahuasca tends to not pair well with schizophrenia or other serious mental health problems. It's kind of like a contraindication of the treatment. So one of the things that we're seeing is they're doing research now showing that childhood trauma is a great indicator of potential schizophrenia, complex childhood trauma, especially if it's not resolved. So I think that they've been looking at complex childhood trauma as like the same kind of indicator that you might have schizophrenia. And the research is showing that that's actually not true, that you can absolutely do ayahuasca with complex childhood trauma. It's not a disqualifier. There's no difference in post-traumatic growth in people who've had challenging experiences in their childhood. So I think that's a positive as well, as far as opening up the usage to people that maybe would have otherwise thought they weren't good candidates. And then the last thing is we have had a decision in Arizona where a church, the Church of the Eagle and Condor, has become the first non-Christian church with legal clearance to use ayahuasca as a sacrament, paving the way for other indigenous-based and syncretic religions. So yeah, that's kind of cool, man. Seeing the doors open up. I mean, this is my perspective. If I could give anybody any advice who's got a church around the world or in the US, use the existing 501c3 network. Go out, get yourself certified in psychedelics, and start doing ketamine for people. When the old people in your church stop fearing death, it's going to start bringing in the young people who do not understand why grandma has changed so much in the last 3 months, and they're going to be seeking the exact same thing too. I mean, this is what it was about. This is where like revival comes from. You know, it's like you have to do something new. You have to offer something to the people that they're not getting anywhere else. And they're offered these protections because they're religious organizations. So it's like, dude, take advantage of this. So that I hope to see more of that. The churches in the future getting involved in this as a way to kind of help their congregants live better, more meaningful lives, ones that aren't defined by like hell and sin. So that's
Right,
about all.
right on. Yep.
Yeah, you said that was the first non-Christian church to allow use of these substances, Brian?
Yeah, there's like two other churches. I could have sworn they were indigenous though. I don't think they were Christian. But I'd be very interested to see who if there are Christian churches out there doing ayahuasca. Yeah, I didn't see any information on that, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah. But like I said, I mean, churches, they have an existing framework that's very favorable to them. Um, particularly in the use of sacred substances like
Yeah.
psychedelics. So it's like, dude, guys, come on, man, step up. I mean, is it possible that this is what Jesus was doing? That they were just like mixing up
Yeah.
Taikion brews and having religious
Exactly. Yeah.
experiences? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh,
I was gonna say, were you referencing the immortality key with some of that there? Because
yeah, yeah.
yeah, Brian Maricescu goes into great detail on his research and all that kind of stuff. So
Well, it's even more than that too. There's this guy, I wouldn't recommend him. He's got some pretty hot takes on stuff, but he is a Greek linguist, a classicist, and he talks about this whole idea that Jesus was like a medicine man, like Christos, like it's been hijacked by Judaism and referred to as the Messiah, but it just means anointed oil. That's it. You know, it just means like you're anointed, you're chosen. And so he argues that he was just like a medicine man who knew like how the universe worked. In other words, he could like understand that if you spit in mud, it would create enzymes that would clear out whatever's causing an obstruction in someone's eye. And we call it a
mm,
miracle. He was just a medicine man.
mm,
So it's kind of interesting. Yeah, just the
yeah,
idea that well, and that I think is the big thing that we miss out on. We assume that our Greeks were just like boy lovers and slave owners, and it's like they weren't. They were like constantly getting high on psychedelics, you know. It's like it was a huge part of their ritual. And I mean, I have a whole thing I could do on Dionysus too, how Jesus and Dionysus are the exact same archetype of the dying and rising god, like right down to the grain and harvest, and Dionysus turning water into wine, just like Jesus does. And it's like, and then you even go a step further and you got Christ on the cross, this dying and rising God who's on the symbol of another dying and rising God called Tammuz, who's Mesopotamian. And it's like, what's going on? Like, think about this. If you're watching like the image of this Christ on a cross who's also a symbol of another God, like, what is the real symbolism here?
yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually what I think the mystery is that it's our job to die and rise over and over again throughout our life. And that Christianity has done us the disservice of being like, yeah, no, Jesus took care of that 2000 years ago. All you got to do is say you believe in him and pay your taxes and you'll go to heaven. It's like, bro, that's not how any of this works.
It's a great subscription service.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I think we're at the coming up on the top of the hour, and I feel like that might be a good place to put a ribbon on this for the day.
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for coming through, Guy, and Jake for coming in.
Yep.
So let's see. if you're watching this on YouTube and want to check out a live event and like be able to engage with us and ask questions, then I'll leave a link for the meetup page in the description. You can check out our calendar for what events we have coming up. And we meet on the third Sunday of every month at 11. So see you guys in December. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.